Hello and welcome back to Parity Radio. In this episode, I speak to a gentleman called Garry Calderwood, who is the creative director for Love in Manchester. And this episode is a bit different, as when I emailed Garry to ask if he'd come on the podcast, he invited me down to the studio itself to record the interview in person as opposed to doing it online. So it's the first one I've done where I've travelled to the guest themselves and I've recorded it in person. So it sounds a little bit different and I've edited it a bit different. I kind of messed up the recording a little bit, so I've had to go in and tweak things, but I think it's come out alright, or it should be okay. But yeah, we discuss all manner of things as we normally do, from how Garry got started in the industry. He's Scottish, so we kind of touch on the contrast between working in sort of the north of England and Scotland. He's into animation, and he's got a few animations on YouTube. We touch on the way that sort of Love works, as they're sort of a contextual studio, and they take a lot of influence from the fashion industry and kind of the zeitgeist that's currently around. And we sort of discuss that briefly, and we talk about his career and sort of what he looks at in student portfolios and all different things like that. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Okay. So I start these all saying, basically, for the people listening that maybe don't have the pleasure of knowing yourself, could you give them a bit of a rundown as to who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I'm Garry Calderwood. Been in the design industry for something like 20 odd years. When it goes really fast, it really does. But I am one of the creative directors at Love. It works different at every agency, I think, just in terms of hierarchy. But here we've got Dave Palmer. He's the executive creative director. So he's like, I guess, the sort of lead singer, front man of the band. And then we've got our senior creative director, who works alongside Dave. That's Chris Myers. So he's probably like the lead guitarist. Sort of taking front center stage. Dave. The creative directors in the business, we are a little bit more in the background. And I suppose we are, if I had to keep going with the metaphors, we're sort of like songwriting team in the background, helping the team come up with ideas. We're also collaborating together.
Yeah.
And working with teams of designers, younger designers, to help them produce their best work and distribute. But really, my specialism in the business, and it evolves, I think it evolves for every designer, but these days, it's brand and packaging design, mostly for high-end spirits, beers and things like that. And really my job is just to make our clients look good. And my job is just to produce good enough work that we make our clients look good and keep coming back to the business to keep giving us great briefs and like we used to do some really interesting work.
Yeah. You describe it as a band. Is that sort of a metaphor for how it works around here, a bit of a band?
Dave, actually, it always comes back to album covers.
Yeah.
It's always an album cover.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of us when we were growing up, that was the opportunity of graphic design. Was looking at what was happening in the music scene.
Yeah.
And wanting to be part of something like that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's almost like the craft beer scene. The labels on products like that. Record covers. In terms of creative license and visual opportunities, and but also the grassroots of it as well. It's quite interesting. The accessibility of technology and people just being able to sort of plug in and really sort of create really exciting stuff that moves away from more commercial brand stuff. So it usually comes back to music.
It always does, doesn't it, really? Yeah. Weirdly, always so, especially in England, doesn't it? Everything called... You speak to people and they're always like Peter Saville, obviously, and all the greats like that. But yeah.
It's funny as well with obviously there's probably a space-time continuum doing a podcast, but the Chanel show happened quite recently in Manchester, and a lot of that was centred around the nostalgia of is the music scene here. And to be honest, it's, I'm originally from this here, Glasgow. Music scene in Glasgow, music scene in Manchester. They're very similar, actually, in terms of the gig scene, music scene, and it's certainly one of the things that attracted me to the city.
Jumping forward and sort of going backwards before you began anything, can you remember what sort of originally got you interested in art and design to begin with?
Yeah, it goes right back, and I'm from, quite a poor family. We grew up in council estates. Sometimes we didn't have money for food even. It was a little bit like the equivalent of food banks these days. We had food parcels from the WRVS, which were unlabelled tins, and it was like potluck occasionally in meat tins. So I've opened these things up. And it could be all manly things, usually corned beef. Yeah, things like corned beef. But I think that adversity in early life, I think it sort of takes you into a direction where you rely on your imagination and sort of looking at people who painted, people who were drawing. Me and my twin brother were always drawing things, and sort of creating worlds. I think at one point we must have seen somebody with, it was like a Mario game, that Donkey Kong, and we used to design our own platform games and scrap pieces of paper, and it was all platforms and ladders and monsters chasing people and all that sort of stuff. And I think at the time, I don't know whether it was my dad and my mum seen that and suddenly decided that they wanted us to be architects. Because I think they saw the lines and the layouts and things like that, and they thought, well, these kids were born to be architects. So I suppose it started from that and getting sort of pushed gently into, looking at what architecture might be. And I think when you start to study a bit of that, you start to find your way, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. But gradually it sort of evolved into art and design, because I think I enjoyed the emotive part of art or graphic art, but liked the science bit of it as well, where you've got geometry and you've got type, so it was a real sort of balance of the two. But architecture, gosh, I ended up doing physics and tech studies and all that at school, and really enjoyed them, but I couldn't see myself doing it as a career. And I'm glad that these things happen for a reason, and ended up pursuing graphic design when I realised you can get a job doing that. But really from early on, it was just, imagination, looking at other people drawing, getting inspiration all the time. And
So as I was sort of snooping around yourself online, just finding things, I found a YouTube channel which I believe is yours. And there's sort of a handful of animations on there that, for the time, look really well done. They're really nicely done. I just wanted to ask, sort of, is animation something that you've always been interested in? Is it something that you sort of got interested later on? Or?
I suppose at the time, as I was going through a college course, animation was sort of part of it. It was Flash. So a lot of the animation that's happened at the time was really it was for websites. But it did spark something that I thought it would be worth pursuing at some point. And I think at the time I was trying to learn After Effects. And that was really useful to sort of almost create a sort of self-set brief, throw yourself in, just see how it all works. And I mean, they're pretty clunky, the animations, but I think I learned a lot doing them at the time because of editing, timing, putting visuals to a narrative, and certainly helped me in my future work, because I was then, with the editing, helping edit a film, storyboard something, and that was useful. I mean, it was funny. The animation stuff gave me such an appreciation for people who can do it incredibly well. And the fact that, certainly you've got a team of people, really crafting something like that, the difference of what you can achieve was a real sort of labour of love.
Yeah.
I think probably my biggest audience were my friends' children. I was not destined for any sort of stardom, but no, it was really useful. And sort of kept those learnings with me.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I think they look really nice. I was watching them. But it's just me. Maybe it's just me. I've grown up on terrible animation in YouTube, and that's even maybe later than that. So am I correct in the fact that you began working in the early 2000s and then pursue a design degree later on?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I suppose when I started, talking 20 odd years ago, and you could, do HND, HNC, and just find yourself in a job.
Yeah.
I was incredibly lucky from that respect. I'd finished school, I put a portfolio together, and I applied for art school. I applied for the Glasgow School of Art, hadn't got in, so then went into clearing, and it was the College of Building and Printing in Glasgow, very technical college, with print studio on the top floors, very technical subjects in there, but there were some fantastic lecturers and tutors, ex-ad agency people that had worked in branding, etc. And very quickly found myself massively out of my depth from the point of view where I thought I was quite good at art and design, and then suddenly you're sort of thrown in with these much more talented individuals, and I really had to put my socks up really quickly. But through that, I'd done my HND. We got a work placement for a couple of weeks. I was placed with that studio in Glasgow, and they just gave me a job, and I think that was, it was all timing. It was all just being in the right place at the right time. Obviously a bit of craft involved as well, but I think that's probably the same case for a lot of people nowadays as well. It's getting your foot in the door, having an opportunity and sort of trying to make the most of it. But I'd continued on, and all my friends were at uni, and I was working at the time, and I sort of went through, a decade or so, and I thought, actually, I'm in danger of sort of, just doing things a particular way, and I was worried about getting stuck in a bit of a rut. And when I started thinking about how I could get out of that, I was taken back to, thinking about the degree, what I might have learned when I did that. So I was working full time in this little studio in Glasgow, and I was doing the degree part time at nights and weekends. I was pretty knackered, to say the least. But there was a fantastic experience because it was all online. So it was through Hertfordshire University, but they had online tutors from all over the UK, and it was a great course. Really great briefs. And actually probably set me up pretty well for the remote working the way COVID's happened, actually. But great experience, and I think it gave, certainly the way I think, the way I approach design, gave it a real shot in the arm. So I'm hoping to be up to new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things. It certainly sparked a career change at that time. And I probably wouldn't be where I am if I hadn't have done that.
No, that's fair. I don't know if you mentioned, when you mentioned the studio you worked at, is that Studio 999? Or was it 999 Design?
Yeah, that's right.
And I was just going to ask, do you have any standout memories from that early part of your career?
Yeah, it was fantastic, because it was like a sort of rock and roll days of design, for good and for bad. But that was a fantastic studio. A kid from Kilmarnock, small sort of industrial town, to get out of where I grew up, get a job in the city, to be working on brands like PlayStation, orange phones, which we no longer have in the UK, but it was the high end technology. We're also working with brands like Reebok, etc. There was photo shoots. There was all this really exciting design stuff happening all the time. So yes, I was making a load of coffees and I was doing a lot of mock-ups and things like that. Probably breathed in a few cans of spray out along the way, but to get thrown in right into the fire, it was great, fantastic experience. And I was there for about a year. While I was there, 9/11 had happened, and there was what I would say was a mini recession within the design industry because of the financial markets being rocked. So there was redundancies and being a junior, I moved on from there. But that experience has always stayed with me because of the sort of design they were doing at the level that they were doing it at. They also had a Manchester studio. Yeah. So they were based in Castlefield, and I worked there for a period of time as well. So it was great. It almost became the sort of cultural attaché to the Manchester studio, which was fantastic. I had family here, so I could sort of go between the two. And again, there was some great people there. But while I think we were out for beers one day, somebody was talking about Love, the studio, and I'd never heard the name before. But when I looked it up, loved the work, super, super exciting stuff. So it almost comes up full circle. Hearing about that agency, following them, and then moving to get a job.
Yeah. That's nice. Your career has sort of been tied to the food and drinks industry, as you mentioned.
Sure.
When did this interest sort of first begin popping up?
I think with any of these things, it's usually tied just to the work that you get in the studio. Feel like certainly with Scottish agencies, certainly at the time when I was, I'd been a designer, there was an awful lot of whiskey work. So really, from those whiskey briefs, understanding those brands, the really rich stories behind them, the crafts, that go into making those products. It was really interesting. Also, there was opportunity to try and push it from a very oldie worldy looking thing into a much newer space. So I always feel that with these things, food and drink, there's opportunity to just make something that nobody's seen before, push it into a much bolder space in a more interesting place. So I guess working on spirits, you're sort of trying to communicate heritage, flavour, and then you can sort of transfer that into things like ice cream or fancy cheese, whatever it may be. It's certainly transferable, but it's interesting. I think we're all emotive creatures, and certainly I get excited by food and drink. The flavours, the experience of it. And it's just something, we just end up either through nature or nurture, just ended up really interested in it. Also, I grew up in Kilmarnock, which is the hometown of Johnny Walker's whiskey. So you grow up in the shadow of a distillery with that, a whiskey brand like that, and it stays with you. It stays with you, the heritage, the pride, all that sort of stuff. So very much. I've grew up.
Food and drink's always been a weird one for me, because the way I've sort of thought about it in the past is, say you're working on a cereal brand. If you took like Kellogg's and stripped all of the information on the packet down, you took all the imagery off and just wrote Kellogg's on the front. People would still buy it, wouldn't they? Because they like Kellogg's weirdly.
And there's that thing where they recognise the brand. I don't know. We have to work really hard on flavour appeal. Make it 15% crunchier. Try and communicate that experience. But you're right. Once somebody is in habitually buying something and know the product, the rest of the furniture in that pack, I think probably becomes less important as the name. But I suppose for you, consumers, then it's slightly different because you're having to start from scratch again to try and educate them about what it is.
I can imagine it's a lot more difficult going from like a startup to like someone like a name brand, how you'd approach those things.
Yeah, you tend to get, certainly with the bigger global brands that we work on, they're real sticklers for putting things through research. So they'll get consumers to look at imagery, have responses to how premium something looks, how refreshing something looks, and that all feeds into the metrics that then they decide on what design goes ahead or doesn't. The younger brands, certainly with the direct-to-consumer markets, you've got a lot of brands that just live on Instagram. And they've got online shops. That is a very different way of shopping from, come down a supermarket now. So there's then, opportunity to maybe lean into something that's a bit more zeitgeisty, a bit more trendy. But that behaviour at that end of the market, it's constantly influencing those bigger brands, because they're now questioning, how do we connect with Gen Zs? How do we bring in new consumers who are all shopping these channels? How do we engage with them? And and we're having to look at those D2C brands and go, well, if you were a bit braver, you sort of, if you were a bit more playful, then there's ways that you can suddenly become much more relevant to these audiences without completely chucking all your brand assets away. Because that's the danger as well, that you just throw the bits away that people recognise you for. But there's certainly ways that you can flip those to make sort of a bit more youthful.
You can kind of imagine it from their perspective as well, can't you, though, in a sense of like, if you've got this core base that you sell to, trying to even sort of step tiptoeing that way a little bit, it might just alienate that one a certain amount, and it's just kind of like a balancing act, I'd assume,
Absolutely. And there's some categories where that fear is slightly more heightened than others. Certainly when we work in the likes of the whiskey industry, you've always got that core, sometimes quite conservative fan base. And if you change it too much, if you change it a little bit, you're going to create shockwaves. People that just aren't going to like it. But then it's a trade-off with who you're bringing on the journey with you, and who you are bringing into the brand in terms of recruitment. But you're absolutely right. It's all needs to be balanced out.
So this is sort of the midpoint of the show, which I do with everyone. It's sort of ripping off Desert Hour Disc, but not really, but kind of. And it's called the Hall of Fame, and it's just the idea that if I could ask you for one thing which has been the real sort of heartbeat of your own career, and it can be anything really, whatever you want, what would that be for yourself?
So it's one of these partworks, I think they call them. So you get like it's in a magazine or something we buy every week. Well, this was a set of encyclopedias. It's called the Tree of Knowledge, and I'm eternally grateful to my parents that were able to put aside whatever money they had to devise these, and we missed quite a few of them. But you basically got a binder. And then every week, or every couple of weeks, you got different subjects across geography, history, art and design, things like that. And you would slot them into the binder, and it would get bigger and bigger and bigger, and thereby, growing your knowledge, which was fantastic because it's sort of, I had never really been interested in history before. But it was a way that me and my brother could digest that at our own pace, on our own terms. Suddenly became fascinating. That, the stories there, but also it had a fantastic art and design section within it as well, where we were learning about artists, we were learning about designers, design movements, etc. And that was history as well.
Yeah.
So it was a real sort of interest there. And me and my twin brother both still have this fascination with history and how you bring the stories through and how you can apply that to, anything you're working on, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, that has really, stayed with me, all the way through school, and then, set me up really in terms of how I interrogate a brief, have a, deep dive into, stories and bits of grand archaeology.
Yeah. No, that's fun. You're too. Sorry if I've been throwing you curveballs, by the way. I'm not trying to trip you up or anything. It's just stuff to cover well. So yeah, I've seen there's a couple of articles you wrote earlier this year on sort of, one was about naming the brand and one was about sort of cultivating that heritage that you sort of touched on.
Sure.
And those ideas sort of, they're sort of polar opposites to each other in my brain. So I was just curious, can you touch on crafting brands that kind of balance those things with each other?
I think it's that there's sort of two sides to the same coin, really, and they've sort of both got to be considered. I always think of the principle in wayfinding, where you've got this idea of progressive disclosure. So when you go to the airport, driving along, and it's going to tell you what direction the terminal is first. So you head to the terminal, and then next it's going to tell you what the car park is. So then you bring over and park the car, and then it's going to tell you, where the check-in desks or the shops are. What you don't get on the motorway is a board that tells you where absolutely everything in the airport is. So it's sort of, it's doing it layer by layer. So I always think, certainly because we work in a very sort of global business, we've got to keep accessibility in mind, just from a point of view of having something that's memorable, something that can say it, can order it, can ask for it. And then, once you've attracted that person to the product and the brand, then it's opening those layers up of storytelling, giving them a level of richness that they can actually immerse themselves in, rather than it being sort of, just skin deep. So I suppose a lot of the work that we do at Love is like that. It may be a really silly idea. It might be something that's actually quite flippant on the surface, quite playful. But as you get closer and you peel the layers away, there's a depth to it. It's connected to a brand story. It's connected to something that's got much deeper roots. And that way you can sort of pull somebody into those brand stories. And actually, quite a lot of time they're trying to get it to learn through play. So they're absorbing all this information while just enjoying maybe an unboxing experience, rather than us just spewing a load of information overwhelming them all at one time. It's about how can we reel that through.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I guess you don't know different briefs really. Say if you were approaching that branding brief, you wouldn't really, that's not even something you'd think of, is it? And it's just sort of very particular to sort of the packaging industry and sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But we also see it in fashion, where you might have a seasonal collection, which on the surface of it, it was just something that's visual. But actually, when you dig into that, it may be connected to a story of the founder. So I love those events. Sort of take you somewhere on the surface and might not be much to it, but when you dig a little bit deeper and you give consumers an opportunity to immerse themselves in it, then it can be quite a rich experience.
Is fashion something you're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, at Love, certainly, we're constantly looking at culture, and we're looking across at different categories. We're looking at how other brands behave. And, luxury fashion houses have always been slightly ahead of the curve in terms of how they activate themselves. Chanel doing staging one of their catwalks, and it was there was like a sort of, what do you call it, sort of rocket launch.
Yeah.
See the rocket space station, and sort of space check-in desks. And that's really fun. And also all the touch points that come off of that are informed by that theme. And that's quite a playful way for a brand to behave. It can just a seasonal thing. It's constantly interesting. They're constantly just sort of, trying something else and exploring new spaces. And, seeing how does a brand work if you put it in that context. So for things like limited editions, for things like brand activation, for doing a pop-up somewhere and looking for a theme, it'd be very useful to look at the luxury fashion houses just to reactivate.
Yeah. During my undergrad, my sort of biggest inspiration is Virgil Abloh. It was obviously the leader of Louis Vuitton for a time. And I did this brand called Context, which was the idea that it came from the idea that if you were to write creative director on like a hoodie, depending on who was wearing it and where they were wearing it, the meaning would change. So like if you gave it to somebody that wrote graffiti, that would be completely different to you, like yourself wearing it, because you're obviously a creative director, so it kind of just changes like that. And it's just kind of, the idea you can take that thinking and then sort of reapply it to the packaging industry is quite interesting, isn't it?
I mean, I think people just like interesting stuff. So you clear the codes, if you mix the context up, if you borrow the visual language from something else and you swap it with unexpectedly, it can take you to so many interesting places.
No, I like that. I like that. So I'm just reading through. I forgot my own questions. So you're obviously the creative director of Love at the moment. And I'm a massive fan of the studio, the way the studio puts out. I think I am more now learning that. I was just curious, could you sort of walk me through how you approach your project? And do you have a certain way of approaching every single project? Does it change between each one? I feel like it's probably the latter now, talking to you a bit more.
Every project, because we are full service, we've got so many different disciplines in the studio. We tend to get very different scopes of briefs. Sometimes it's from a sort of retail point of view, sometimes it's a new product and we've got to design the packaging and branding. Sometimes all of that's done and it's a campaign that we're working on to promote that. So I suppose it's constantly changing, but I suppose there's a consistent way that we approach the thinking in terms of how we tackle those, and it's always to try and unearth something that somebody hasn't thought of before, a slightly different way of looking at it. And that might be as simple as a client coming to us and going, right, we've decided we would to put all the money into a social campaign because we think it's going to get us this. And we have to look at that and say, what are you actually trying to achieve as a business? What's your business challenge? Because what they actually need better off doing is a load of pop-ups, in cities, worldwide, or it may be, some limited editions, or it may be recruitment of a different audience type that will get them to, solving that business challenge. So we're always interrogating the brief in that kind of way. So that's the sort of starting point. But we're also looking to culture. We're looking at what people are doing out in the world, what other brands are doing, how people are responding to brands. How do we get on the conversation there rather than interrupting? So we become part of their conversations, part of their world, really. And I think a lot of times when we work with brands, they very much think in sort of broadcasts. So we're a brand, we've got a message to put out there, and we're going to interrupt you and tell you all about this fascinating new product. We try and come at it from a bit of a different point of view. They're trying to engage people and get them so excited about whatever's going on that they almost take ownership of it. It becomes, something we want to talk to people about. They really sort of embrace and get involved with. So it changes massively depending on the brief, but it's trying to find just a new angle on it. And there was always a bit of, in order to get there was quite a lot of sort of in-depth research, sort of brand archaeology, talking to archivists, there might just be some little nuggets in there that can waft into, a really fun idea that we can then, run with.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. So, as you mentioned, you're originally from Scotland and you're obviously based in Manchester now.
Yes.
I was just curious, could you touch on sort of the different creative industries that, sort of the differences between the two, maybe the similarities even?
I mean, I think nowadays, culturally, a lot of design agencies are quite sort of similar in terms of how they operate, how they run. I've worked briefly in places like Amsterdam as well. And again, there's a sort of global design mindset, I would say. But certainly from my experience, and this might just be because I'd worked in smaller studios when I was younger, you tend to wear a lot more hats. You sort of jump around different roles. Certainly in the design industry in Scotland, when I was growing up, I was doing animation, I was doing art direction, I was the photographer, and I was clothing and art. Yeah. I was designing an exhibition, I was doing editorial design, and then you're also jumping between different categories as well. So you might be working for stuff from third sector, public sector announcement stuff, behavioural change, and then the next week you're working on consumer products. Doing a campaign for a new wine or a new whiskey, etc. So when I moved to Manchester, the feeling was that you sort of get to specialise a little bit better, and it probably changes massively between studios. But certainly, I think in England, sort of being allowed to play to particular strengths and nurture those, and sort of bring it in the journey, and with that, they sort of pass on the knowledge as well. Certainly in my design life in Scotland, I was, a lot of hats, jumping into a lot of different roles. And sometimes when you can always apply great creativity to all of those, but I think sometimes you can become a sort of jack of all trades, where you've spread yourself so thin between all of the different facets that it then becomes quite hard to master them. So you end up picking up lots of different little bits, but not quite get to the level where you feel 100%, like you can take on with it. Winging it a bit. Which is exciting. But it's interesting. I think said as a young designer, being quite open and trying lots of things, I think it's good for your development. But there does come a time where you start to sort of zero in a bit in terms of what you enjoy and what you'd like to do more of, and where you can really fine tune in terms of putting the approach up.
No, that's fine. I've thought about that in the past, and the way I've thought of it is if you went to your dentist, as an example, or if you got two dentists, one was just a dentist, the other one was a dentist that can also juggle chainsaws and he plays pool really well, you'd pick the other dentist because you don't really care about those things, if that makes sense. So you've had a nice career spanning a load of different agencies, and I assume you would have interviewed a few different sort of graduates on your way up. Could you touch on what makes a good portfolio for a graduate?
I suppose sometimes it's really different as well, depending on the candidate. Quite often you'll see portfolios with like the finished idea. I like to be taken on the journey in terms of where's the idea come from? What was the insight? But also, I think sometimes, these sort of university briefs can be quite limiting in terms of you're producing a singular can design that is an expression of a brand. It's trying to say quite a lot with just one bit of media, one canvas. So I like to see somebody that can broaden the thinking beyond that singular execution. So how does that brand behave for that product? Even if it's just a little nod, is it some fly posters? What would you say on a fly poster? Where do you pop up? How do you talk to consumers? Things like that. It's never just taking a brand and badging a load of other things with the brand. It's how do you adapt that behaviour to those different settings where the brand shows up. It's a big ask, but I suppose for the certain level of work that we're trying to produce, when we can see a little glimpse of that in a student, then that sort of way of thinking holistically, it's a really good sign, and that certainly gets me excited about the potential of that person.
Beginning to round off, and this is really cliche what I asked in, but I ask everyone the same thing. If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice when you first got started, what you know now, what would that be?
Well, I was saying when you work in Scotland, you wear an awful lot of hats. I would go back and come up very strong up with myself about the work-life balance. I've seen it so many times through my career where colleagues or friends who have burnt out, who have just thrown everything into a design job, and they might be quite unhappy, they might just be running on fumes. So it's getting that balance right, because ultimately you can run out of steam, you can run out of inspiration, you can be pretty sad, you can be pretty knackered. So, that balance. I've worked jobs where I was doing 100 hours a week, for prolonged periods of time. And it takes a toll, work-life balance, really important. Also, start your pension early.
That's fair enough. And then, super lastly, where can people find yourself online?
Right, so there was a stage where I'd taken an awful lot of my older work offline, just because of, I guess, what I've been doing in the studio. A lot of the work that I produce doesn't really see the light of day because of non-disclosure.
I can imagine.
So it started to feel really outdated. So I'm taking an awful lot of it down, but I've got a very small Insta page. So Garry designs things on Instagram. So a few bits and bobs there.
That's it then. Thank you very much. Hello again. Hope you enjoyed that. If you want to find me online, as ever, I am Parity Material everywhere you can find me. And a bit different this one. Came out alright in the end, I think. And the dynamic of kind of recording it in person is a little bit different to how you do it online. You can kind of skirt off into different topics a little bit easier and all different things like that. So it's kind of nice. And obviously getting to see the Love Studio was really lovely, if you'll pardon the pun. We've got a really nice space. Super nice. I think that's about it. I shall see you next time.